Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be doing a bridal makeup tutorial. Now, I'm not engaged despite this ring I put on here for the vibes, but I thought I would do a video for all you upcoming brides. If you're planning on doing your wedding makeup yourself, or if you just want some inspo, this video is for you. I'm going to go through all the steps on exactly how I would do my own wedding makeup. All the best products I would use, all the tips and tricks. I don't know when I'm going to be getting married, but I've always said I will 100% be doing my own makeup myself because I don't like when other people do my makeup. Or there's a few people that I would maybe trust, but I just prefer doing my makeup myself. And I feel like a lot of people are like that. You know your own face the best. You kind of know what suits you. Obviously, getting a makeup artist is great, and there's so many talented wedding makeup artists, or makeup artists that specialize in wedding makeup, and they're so talented, absolutely incredible, but they're also very pricey. So just knowing that obviously not everyone can afford that, and not everyone wants to. Like I said, some people just want to do it themselves. So sorry, that was a ramble. Let's get straight into it. It's so hot in London today, and I don't want to have my fan on because of the sound, so excuse me if I'm sweating, but at least I'll just test the durability of my makeup. Wouldn't be a video of mine without an iced coffee. I did a look a few months ago that I posted on Pinterest, and it kind of went a little bit viral. Like, it's done so well, these like 3 separate pictures on Pinterest, and I tagged it. Why is there cat hairs everywhere? I tagged it like bridal makeup because I thought it was quite bridal, and it's been saved in lots and lots of bridal Pinterest boards. I'm going to change the look up a little bit, but I kind of wanted to recreate that sort of same vibe in this look. I'm going to start with skin prep. Now, skin prep on your wedding day is very important because this is going to kind of determine how the skin makeup turns out and how it lasts. I'm going to go very light on the skin prep. I'm going to use my 2 very trusted products, starting with Rhode Glazing Milk. Any like sort of milky primer I would think would be so good for skin prep because it's really hydrating and moisturizing, but it's not heavy at all, and it's not going to be like greasy, make your makeup just slide off. I will say as well with skincare, when it comes to wedding day makeup and bridal makeup, this is a very special day, so I would not recommend going in with anything new, anything that your skin is not used to. If you are getting married, I would recommend maybe like 6 months before, I mean however long you can, a few months before the actual day, settle into kind of the skincare routine that you want to be doing up until the big day, so that you're not using any like new products and you don't know what's going to be happening, especially with things like exfoliating, any like retinols or stuff like that. You don't want to be trying anything new like a month or 2 weeks before the wedding. Then going in with a Glow SP Pink Juice Moisturizer. You guys know I absolutely love this stuff. I'm going with like 4 pumps, so I'm kind of using quite a lot and just lathering my face in this, and then I like to kind of wait and allow it to sink in to my skin. But this is a really great light moisturizer for under makeup. I think I feel like it gives a lot of hydration, which makes the makeup look really nice, but it doesn't feel like heavy or greasy or slippery or anything. Now, you guys know I'm a big SPF advocate, but I'm gonna say on your wedding day, if you're able to, I would recommend skipping on moisturizer. Obviously, if you're getting married somewhere super sunny, I don't want you to burn, so like if that's the case, by all means go ahead and use SPF, especially like on your shoulders, and your body's fine, but on your face, if you're able to skip it, I say skip it, just because even the best SPFs under makeup are just a little bit slippery. They're basically just like not going to help the situation if you kind of start, I mean, you're going to be wearing this makeup for many hours. Usually you start getting ready in the morning about like 6 a.m 7 a.m, and you're going to be wearing it all day way into the night, and you want it to look gorgeous. So any little thing you can do for longevity, do it. I never say this, but if you're able to skip out on SPF on this one day, do that. Obviously, I don't want you to burn, so if it's very sunny, still wear it. Last thing for skin prep is we're gonna need a grippy primer. This one's from Maybelline. This is actually a really nice primer. Elf's got a good one as well. Milk's also got a good one. There's a lot of high-end ones as well, but any sort of primer that's light on the skin, as I say, not greasy, and is tacky, so it's gonna make your face a little bit sticky, is good because it's gonna help the makeup stick to your face. I'm just gonna add a little bit of this, mainly around my nose and around my mouth, because this is where I like sweat the most and get the most oily, and where most people do, and on my forehead. I'm gonna leave this to sit for about 3 to 4 minutes. That's very oddly specific. For a couple minutes. The foundation I'm going to be using is the Giorgio Armani Luminous Silk. Now, this is an iconic bridal foundation, and I feel like it definitely deserves it. This is such a nice foundation, and I feel like it's like the perfect sort of soft matte look, where it's just the perfect middle ground from being like a matte foundation and a dewy foundation. I know a lot of girls love the dewy look, and I do love a dewy look as well, but on your wedding day you don't want to be looking super dewy all day. First of all, because it doesn't last as long. It's just a fact that matte makeup lasts a lot longer than dewy makeup does. Second of all, in pictures, dewy can sometimes translate to sweaty, especially if you're going to be wearing this makeup all day. You're going to be looking a little bit more oily throughout the day, so it's just a safer bet to stay in that soft matte sort of region, both for photography and longevity reasons. I'm just going to apply this on the back of my hand, and I'm using this Huda Beauty. It's a very like dense, I actually need to wash this, but ignore that, dense foundation brush, so it's not going to give us a lot of brush strokes. Dipping that in, and we're stippling, not swiping, stippling. This also has a very beautiful medium coverage finish, and I feel like it's very buildable. If you want to apply less, if you're a less coverage girly and you want to apply less, that's fine as well, but you can also kind of build it up, and I feel like it doesn't look cakey even though you apply a lot. One thing I will say with bridal makeup and any sort of makeup that you're doing that there's going to be photography is sometimes you do need to use a lot more of the product than you think, especially if you're doing your makeup yourself for your wedding and you're not a professional at makeup. You're not used to doing makeup on yourself all the time, or like full glam at least. Sometimes you do just need to apply a little bit more than you think you need, because I always feel like the camera removes like 10-20% of your makeup and it just looks like less, dilutes it a little bit. So you're gonna need to go a little bit heavier. Obviously you still want to look and feel like yourself, so if that's not you, then obviously don't do it, but that is just a little tip if you want your makeup to look the best you possibly can in pictures. I'm also dragging this down my neck, even though we will be adding some body glow later, but we don't want to look like our face and our neck is two different colors. I'm just taking a sponge. This one has got cat hair in it but it's from Boots' own brand and it's actually really nice, and I'm just slightly tapping over my whole face to get rid of any brush strokes, and also this picks up any excess product that we might not need and just makes everything look a little bit more smooth. And I've kind of gone around my under eye area. I haven't really applied any foundation there because I'm going to be applying concealer on my under eyes, and I just like want to avoid applying too much product. I'd rather just keep the concealer there, no foundation. That is the foundation. Now onto concealer. I'm going to be using two concealers for this look, starting with the Lancome all over concealer. This one is a lot more medium coverage, a lot creamier, more moisturizing and easily blendable. It feels a lot more like your skin, so I'm going to be using this as my base layer, basically applying this on any spots that I have that I want to cover up. This is also closer to my actual skin tone, so it's going to be better to covering up anything that's on my skin, if that makes sense, whereas we want our under eyes to be brighter. I'm still going to be applying a little bit of this on my under eyes as like a little base layer before we apply our highlighting shade. Blending this all out with my sponge, I'm just dabbing very lightly, trying to keep the sponge in the same place because we want to keep the coverage on the area that I put it. So I like to just dab on the same spot over and over again, and then I kind of go around and dilute the edges. Same thing here. And then for my under eyes I'm doing the same, so I'm definitely keeping most of the product in my kind of inner corner here where my under eyes are the darkest, but then I'm also dragging it upward and going over my lid. Now I feel like we've got a good base going, but I'm going to go in with the Hourglass concealer. I love this concealer. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like it. I'd say if this doesn't work for you, maybe try the Huda one because that is another one of my favorites, but this one is a bit of a lighter shade, so it's going to act as a subtle highlight. I don't want it to be too light because sometimes if you go too light it can end up just looking a bit gray, but this is a good highlighting shade for me, and I'm going to apply this mostly on my under eyes right here where they are the darkest, same on the other side, and then a little sort of lifting line on both sides. I'm also going to be applying a little bit in the center of my forehead as a little brightening. I'm going to start by blending out my forehead because I like to wait just for a minute or so with my under eye concealer just to let it kind of dry that tiny bit. It kind of gives us maximum coverage of that concealer. And then blending out my under eyes. Again, same technique of keeping the sponge mostly in this spot, and then when I feel like it's kind of starting to blend out, I'll kind of start blending it, like tapping my sponge around, blending it a bit upwards. When I've kind of blended everything, I like to just take my sponge and go over my eyelid. Continuing on with cream products, I'm first going to go in with contour. I don't usually really use contour and bronzer. I usually just use bronzer, but I feel like, you know, we're going all out. It's our wedding day. Let's do both. And a lot of people do ask me how to use both, so I thought I would show you guys. I'm going to be using the Rare Beauty contour and the Anastasia Beverly Hills bronzer, starting with the contour. Now the difference between contour and bronzer is that contour is more cool toned, leaning a bit more gray, versus a bronzer that is a lot more warm toned, if you can see the difference. So it's leaning a lot more orange. Starting with the contour, I feel like going straight in with the wand like this can be a bit unpredictable to how much product we're actually using. So I'm going to put it on the back of my hand, and then going in with the smaller side of the Mario F4 brush, I'm going to be going very lightly, stippling motions as close as we can get to the cheekbone without being on top of it, but you don't want to be like all the way underneath it. I'd say kind of like half and half on top of it and underneath it, if that makes sense. We're connecting it to the top of the ear as well. Very light stippling motions until I feel like it's kind of blended out. I'm doing the same on this side. What we're doing with the contour is basically accentuating any natural shadows that you would probably already have to accentuate bone structure. You do want to be careful with contour. If you use too much of it or don't blend it out enough, it can look a bit muddy. I like using my sponge as well, just kind of like if I feel like it's a bit too much, I'll kind of go lightly over. I want it to be subtle. Taking my brush again, I'm going to go underneath my jawline, under my chin right here. This is a bad angle, but blending it like this. I do want to make sure it's blended though, so okay, this is very unflattering, but I'm going to do a little double chin and just make sure that it's blended. Then with like a smaller brush like this, just taking a tiny bit more of the contour, and we're going to be doing very light nose contour. I like to follow the natural structure of my nose, but going a little bit narrower than it actually is. If you follow directly the structure of your nose, you might just end up making it look wider. So I kind of want to paint it on top of my nose, if that makes sense. I like to start down here and just very subtly start doing the line following up, and then I connect it to my brow here. I don't know if you can really see it that well on camera. Same on the other side. And then taking a little bit and putting it underneath my nose to lift it up the slightest bit, and also on top of my bridge here. It makes the tip look smaller and more lifted, I think. I'm just going to take my sponge and lightly blend it out. I do want this to be very, very subtle, and a sponge is good for that because it kind of removes any excess product. That's all we're doing for contour. Now time for bronzer. Bronzer, like I said, is more warm toned, and the point of it is basically to give you that sun-kissed, tanned, bronzy look. Taking the bigger side of my Makeup by Mario brush, we need to be less precise with this. I just like to put the excess on my hand a little bit, so I'm gonna end up looking very messy, but that's okay. And this we're putting on top of our cheekbones a lot more. It is gonna kind of slightly blend in with the contour. That's okay. I like to put it on my temples here as well, and kind of up to my forehead. I do like a lot of bronzer, so I do use quite a lot of it, but obviously you can use less if you want. Continuing along my forehead here, and the same on the side. I'm going to take a tiny bit and run it along my jawline just because I want everything to look cohesive, so I feel like we need a little bit of that color on there as well, and also just a tiny bit on the top of my nose. And then I'm taking my sponge and just kind of running over everything, making sure everything's very well blended. Any sort of leftover concealer that's on the sponge, I like to kind of take that and run it underneath my bronzer. It very subtly just like kind of cleans it up, and I think I'm happy with that blend for now. Liquid blush. Now I love a pink blush, but I feel like I need a little bit more of a muted tone if I were to get married. This one is very pigmented, and I love the packaging as well. It's a very thin formula. I've cleaned off the small side of the Makeup by Mario brush. Ideally I would use a different brush, but I really want to use this one. I'm just picking up a bit of that blush, making sure it's not too much because we can always build it up, but it's harder to take it off. And this is obviously quite pink, but it's a little bit more, it's not like a hot pink. It's a bit more muted, and I feel like this is such a lovely bridal blush. I'm applying it quite high up on my cheek, so kind of above and with my bronzer, and blending it up to my temples, but I don't want to go too intense with it because I'm also going to be applying powder blush. But the thing with blush is I feel like that's usually like the first thing to kind of fade off for me, and I feel like a lot of people say that as well, so I always allow myself a bit of room to apply more than I want it to be, you know what I mean? Because throughout the day I feel like it does just like get a bit muted. I think I'm happy with that, and then I'm just going to take very slightly on top of my nose, very lightly. It is time to set this in place. Before I set it with powder, I want to set it with some setting spray. This is just going to kind of help us a little bit with longevity. This is the Urban Decay All Nighter. It's a very classic setting spray. Going in with a light layer over my face. Now the main setting powder I'm going to be using today is, you guessed it, the Huda Beauty Easy Bake Powder, but I did want to offer an alternative as well. You guys just know how much I love this one, and it kind of like smooths my under eye out and blurs it like no other, and it photographs beautifully. But I do also love the Hourglass Veil Loose Powder, and I feel like if you're someone with maybe drier skin, I mean I've got dry skin and I don't mind this one, but maybe more mature skin, this is a great alternative. It is also very like perfecting and blurring, but I would say the Huda might might be a little bit drier. Give this a try if you're worried about that. I feel like powdering could potentially kind of make or break this makeup, because we do need to set it really well so that it looks flawless in pictures, so it lasts all day, but we don't want to look dry. Most important tip for me, now we've applied all our liquid products, is to make sure that our under eye is not creased. It's always going to be a little bit creased because everyone's got lines under their eyes. Every single person in the world has got some sort of line under their eyes, and if you leave concealer for a while, it is going to set into those lines. But just make sure that they're all blended out before you go and set it with powder. I'm then taking my powder puff and dipping it into the powder, dabbing it onto my hand to get rid of all the excess, and then kind of starting to press it onto my under eyes. Just focusing it right here and then going kind of down my nose and around it. Always kind of dabbing and pressing, never swiping. That is a big rule, especially now. Kind of bringing the powder puff up a little bit to lift. I'm going to grab a bit more powder and go around my mouth, because this is where I do tend to sweat a lot, and on my chin. I'm leaving this mostly without any powder for now. Doing the same on the other side, of course, and then I'm doing the center of my forehead, and then lastly going over my nose. If you've got oily skin, you might need a little bit more on your actual nose, but I've got quite dry skin, so this is fine for me. I'm then going to be doing an extra step and taking the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish Powder, and this is one that I really recommend having with you, or like having your bridesmaid or whatever having on your wedding day, because this is such a great touch-up powder, and you can kind of touch it up a long day, and I feel like it doesn't really make your makeup cakey or anything like that. Some powders, it can kind of cause a lot of build-up if you're constantly retouching, but this is a great touching up powder. I'm just going to take a little bit on my brush, go over everywhere where I powdered, and kind of use the brush as well to swipe off any excess. I'm also going to take this underneath my bronzer or contour just to kind of like clean it up a little bit and set this area in place, and ever so slightly go over the perimeter of my face, very, very lightly. Time for powder bronzer. I'm going to be going in with the NARS Laguna 01 bronzer. I feel like this is such a good bronzer because it's very like velvety. It's not completely matte, but it doesn't have any shimmer in it, but it just blends out beautifully. I'm taking this on my saie brush. All the saie brushes, do they have names? Because this one doesn't have a name, I don't think, but it's like kind of a flat, fluffy brush. I don't want to take it on a big brush because I want to be precise with what I'm doing. Just pick it up a little bit and then very lightly kind of dabbing it on everywhere where I put the Anastasia bronzer before. So we're kind of setting it in place and also intensifying it. The reason I like to do both cream and powder product, which a lot of people do ask me, like, why do you do cream bronzer and powder bronzer, is first of all, it adds dimension. So you have like a bit underneath, a bit on top, and it also adds longevity because throughout the day, eventually some layers of makeup are going to start to wear off, and then, you know, you've got something underneath to kind of peek through. Overall, for every day, you really do not need to be using both. It is kind of an extra step before, especially occasion, like especially your wedding. I feel like it just adds a lot to the look and makes it look a lot more like makeup, if that makes sense. I'm going to take a tiny bit and run it on top of my nose and underneath as well. For powder blush, I'm going to go in with my YSL Make Me Blush. This is shade 44. I feel like it's quite similar to our Hourglass blush. The tone of it looks more similar in real life than on camera, but it's kind of like a pinky. I'm really bad at describing colors, but you guys can see what it looks like, and it's got a little bit of a shimmer glow to it. I'm not going to take too much, but just a little bit on my brush, dab off the excess, and then lightly fluff it in the same kind of area that I applied the liquid blush before. And again, very lightly, just like a tiny bit on the top of my nose. I'm now taking my Hourglass Ambient Butterfly palette. These palettes are all limited edition, which is so annoying. This is the only one I have. This is a mix of blushes and highlighters, but usually these palettes all just have such amazing powders, and I feel like they're very like bridal friendly. I'm going to be using these two highlighting powders mixed together on like a fluffy brush like this. I've kind of just dusted off the excess, and I'm just going to lightly swipe across the high point on my cheekbone very lightly, because the blush I use does have some glow to it, but this is just going to add a little bit more glow when I turn to the side. I really don't want it to be obvious when I'm facing front. Like, you don't want a strip of highlighter, but I just want like a subtle wash. The placement is like on top of my cheekbone and kind of blending it out into my temple a tiny bit. Same on the other side here. I would usually put a bit of highlighter on my nose, but I'm not going to do that today because because my nose is the place that is going to become shiny first, and I just don't want to add any shine to it. For my eyebrows, I'm going to keep it very simple. I usually like my eyebrows very simple anyway, so I'm just going to stick to what I would usually do, and I want them to look very natural. Going in with the Benefit 24-hour brow setter to begin with. This is just a clear brow gel, but I'm just being very careful not to touch any of my actual skin because I don't want like a blob of eyebrow gel on there. I don't want them to look very like combed and laminated, but I just kind of want them to stay in the place where they should be. I don't want my eyebrow hairs flying all over the place. And when that's dried out a little bit, I'm going to take my NYX Lift and Snatch brow pen. This is basically the brow routine I do every single day, and just filling in a few little gaps in my brow and like any place where I feel like I need a little bit more, I don't know, just a bit more brow hairs basically. But I also like to kind of lengthen them a little bit just because I feel like they're quite short and my face is quite wide. I just like to kind of lengthen them because it fills in this gap. I don't know, I feel like it suits me, but still keeping basically and just following my natural shape. Okay, it's actually time to move on to the eyeshadow now, but I'm just going to go in with another layer of setting spray of the Urban Decay All Nighter, and then, you know, obviously when everything's done we're going to finish it off with setting spray as well. I kind of like to do it in layers, especially with makeup looks that I know I need them to last. Alright, now it's time for eyeshadow. First step is making sure there's no creases on my lid, and I actually might just apply a bit more concealer. I'm going to do the Lancome one just to use as an eyeshadow base basically, with like a little fluffy packer brush like this. Just kind of lightly applying that on my lid. There's already concealer on my lid, so maybe this was unnecessary, but I just feel like I needed a tiny bit more. I'm not going to set the concealer before we start. I like to keep it wet so that the eyeshadow has something to grab onto, but if you just want like a very light wash of color, I recommend setting it because it does also make it a little bit easier to blend and makes the eyeshadow go on a little bit less pigmented, which might sound like a bad thing, but if you want a light wash of color, then that's, you know, that is the look that you're going for. I'm going to be using a mix of these two palettes here today, the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes the Neutrals palette, and then this is the Morphe, what's this called, Gold Seeker palette. I really want the warmer toned Makeup by Mario palette as well because I feel like that would be a perfect in between of these, but I'm going to start with the shade right here. It's like a very light neutral brown shade on a fluffy brush, and just start by kind of focusing it at the outer corner of my crease here and then blending it inwards. I'm going in circular motions very lightly. Again, here you can always add more, but it's more difficult if you want to take away any color, so it's better to kind of build it up, blending it around in circular motions and kind of blending it slightly outwards, and also bringing it up here into the front of my brow. I'm now going to take this shade in the Morphe palette, which is a lot warmer and a little bit more pigmented, and I'm going to blend that basically into the shade but keeping it a little bit closer to my actual eye, so I'm not dragging it out as much, if that makes sense. I'm kind of just going on top of where I applied the first shade, maybe blending it a little bit more into my actual lid, but again just going in circular motions round and round until I'm happy. I'm just going to quickly do the same on the other eye as well. I'm now going to basically take those two shades. Obviously you don't have to be blending two shades together. If you can find one that's like in the middle, then that's great, but on the same brush, and just very lightly fluff it on my lower lash line. Nothing too precise or anything. I'm making sure not to put too much though, but this is a very light shade really, so we don't need to be too worried about that. But you can see the difference. I basically just want like a light wash of the shade on my under eyes. Now I'm going to grab a little packing brush like this and the light shade that we have here in the palette, the light off-white shade, and I'm going to be packing this on my lid, focusing it in the inner corner here. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit more for this. I'm basically just using the shape of the brush to create like a little soft cut crease-ish shape onto like half of my lid, packing the shade in my inner corner as well. Then I'm taking my fluffy brush again, which has got some residue from before, and just using that to kind of diffuse the edge slightly. And I'm also making sure to pack a bit of this bright shade just in the middle of my lid here along my lash line, just to give it a bit of like a bright pop. You can see how big of a difference that made to my eye. And then again, I'm going to take the fluffy brush and just whatever residue's left on it and use that to kind of blend out the line, or like the area in between the darker shadows and the light kind of whitish shadow, just very lightly so there's no like harsh line or anything like that. I'm then going to take a tiny little pencil brush like this one and dip it into this like light shimmery shade and dab that into my inner corner in like very small area. I don't want it to be all over. and then I'm just using my little finger to kind of blend it out very subtly. I'm then gonna take my little Kylie Cosmetics glitter quad, or you could just use the same shade that we just used in the inner corner. But I'm gonna take this gold shade. Oh, you can see it on camera. I'm gonna take this gold shade just on my finger and apply this in the middle of my lid, more close to my lash line, using my finger to also kind of like blend it out and diffuse the edges. But this is where I want to concentrate the product, like right above my iris basically, just to like draw a bit of attention right there. I don't know, I feel like it makes your eyes pop a little bit. Last thing I'm gonna do eyeshadow wise is again take my Mario palette, and with a little smudger brush I'm gonna be taking this darkest brown, and I'm gonna be packing this as close to my lash line as possible, only on like the outer 1/3 of my eye, making sure to kind of diffuse it and made it fade into my skin when I get closer to the middle of my eye, if that makes sense. And then I'm gonna very lightly kind of drag it outwards. I definitely don't want a full wing, but I kind of do want that little elongated look, so just very subtly dragging it outwards. My camera did just die. I still feel like it does in every single video. I'm sorry if the angle changed, I had to change the battery. But I'm basically just using the brush to very lightly drag it out, and then I can even use my finger to very lightly kind of blend it out. And that's basically all I'm doing for eyeliner. Then taking the same shade again, just a tiny bit of it really, and very lightly running that across my lower lash line as close to the lashes as I can possibly get. I want this to be very subtle because I don't like a lot of dark on my lower lash line, especially for a look like this where I want it to feel very light, but I just want a tiny little bit of that shadow. I'm going to take that light shade again. I'm actually going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to take the same brush that I used before, just take a tiny little bit and use it to clean up my eyeliner, like eyeshadow slightly. I just feel like this makes a very subtle difference, but it just kind of sharpens it a little bit, just very slightly, and then I kind of just dust off the excess with a brush. But it's a really subtle detail that just kind of cleans it up a little bit. And then another trick, which someone on TikTok said they learned this from Mario, I can't remember who, but taking the lighter shade on like a clean fluffy brush like this, just a little bit, and using this, obviously depending on your skin tone, but for me I feel like this would work, fluffing it around kind of in like the part of my under eye, which is the absolute darkest, just going in like very light circular motions. You know what, I feel like that looks really good. You just have to make sure to not use too much because obviously this is a very pigmented product, but you know what, I feel like this is actually really brightening up my under eye and making it look really nice. Lovely. It is time to move on to lashes. I'm going to start by curling them. I'm actually not going to curl them as intensely as I usually do because we're going to be applying clusters on top, and it's actually quite difficult to apply clusters, or any sort of lashes for that matter, if your lashes are like super curled. But I do still want them to look nice and curled, obviously. And then going with my Maybelline Sky High Waterproof, my go-to mascara always, and obviously waterproof is great. Both, it's gonna hold our curl, and it's our wedding day, we might be crying, who knows, we need some waterproof mascara. I'm applying it quite generously, but I also don't want to put too much. I don't want them to be too clumpy or anything. And then just doing a tiny little bit on my bottom lashes as well. These are the clusters I'm going to be using. They're from Allure. You know, I actually prefer individual lashes when they're not in clusters. I feel like it's easier to use the clusters because they're like three together, but I feel like the individual ones look better. But I can never find them these days. I feel like it's only clusters everywhere. I might actually cut these up. I always prefer using the medium and the short. I never really use the long, but that's just because my lashes naturally aren't that long, so I feel like they just kind of stick out and look very obvious. I'm going to start by taking a medium. I'm actually going to cut this up so the pieces are a bit smaller like this, and we basically just apply a bit of glue to the tip, and then you can kind of just stick them on straight away. I'm starting in my outer corner, but I'm doing it about like maybe 3 millimeters from the edge of my eye because I don't want to put it all the way down here because that's going to kind of drag my eye down. So I'm basically applying the first one just about here, and I feel like that's gonna lift our eye up. Next piece is going right here. You can also just kind of see if you feel like there's any gaps in your lashes and any places where you feel like you need a bit more. And then just adding one of the short ones. This one's cut up as well, closer to the middle of my eye. And I think that's all I want to do. I love a very subtle lash. Like, I don't even know. Yeah, no, I think you can definitely tell a difference. It's very subtle, but it just gives a little bit more. It just looks like my lashes are thicker than they actually are. We're on to lips now. For my lip combo, I'm obviously going to be using the lip liner that I always use, that I just find suits me the best, and I feel like it does suit a bridal look, and that is the Anastasia Mocha. I do need to replace this soon because this is getting pretty small. Just to go into a bit more detail about how I actually do overline. I overline slightly on the top and the bottom of my lip like this. And when I do, I am kind of following the natural shape of my lip. I'm keeping the lip liner kind of half on my skin, half on my lip. So I'm not going completely outside of my lip, but I'm also not keeping it completely inside, if that makes sense. And then for the rest of my lip, I'm just going to follow my natural shape because I don't want to overline it right here or it's going to look just a little bit messy. When you just overline the center as well, it just makes your lip look a little bit powderier. And then taking the pencil and just kind of lightly blending out the line. I don't want to color in my whole lips. I just want to make sure the line isn't that harsh. Then taking the MAC Thanks It's MAC lipstick. I feel like this is a really nice bridal shade. Just dabbing that lightly in the center. And then topping it off with a gloss, I'm going to go in with the Armani Prismaglass in 08. Like this really pretty shimmery light pink, almost like clear. And then as a final step, setting this all in place, I'm going to be going in with the L'Oreal Infallible 3-second setting mist. This is kind of like hairspray. This is actually going to lock you in. So shaking it up and then holding our breath. Another good one is the One Size setting spray. I've heard it's really good for bridal makeup or any makeup that you just want to like actually lock in place. Like this is not something that you use every day. Actually, I lied. That wasn't the last step. We're of course going to need some body glow. I'm going to be using the Sol de Janeiro Body Glow. This is a glow oil and it is beautiful. It also smells amazing. Obviously, if you don't want that scent on your wedding day, go with something else, but I love this. And we would of course be applying this once the dress is on. You know, you don't want to be changing and, you know, risking anything. This is not completely transfer proof, but it just has the most beautiful glow ever. Making sure to go all up my neck too. And obviously if your shoulders are out, put this on your shoulders. Oh, it's stunning. If you've got a shorter dress, maybe later in the evening, pop this on your legs. And that is the look all finished. I feel very bridal. I'm, you know, ready to go walk down the aisle right now. I've got a few tips as well to keep in mind. I forgot to mention this at the start, which I should have done before I started my makeup, is brightening eye drops. These ones are just from Boots. I know there's lots of different types. I've heard these are not great to use for every single day, but especially for a big day where you want to look your best, these are great. Makes such a subtle difference, but I feel like it does make a big difference, if you know what I mean. Just 2 drops in each eye and it really does brighten the whites of your eyes. I definitely recommend either if you have like a little bag on your wedding day or if you have a maid of honor or bridesmaid that can carry stuff for you, to carry with you, of course, your lip combo to touch up throughout the day. Some Q-tips just in case you need to like clean up anything. A clean powder puff and your setting powder. I strongly recommend the Charlotte Tilbury one. Maybe even bring your little lashes and lash glue just in case anything goes wrong. If you're actually about to get married and you're watching this and you're thinking of using this tutorial as even just like a guide or inspiration, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, I feel very honored. Please send me pictures of your wedding makeup. I would absolutely love to see it and see how it turns out, even if you don't follow this one to a T. If you get any sort of inspiration, I would love to see how it turns out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video and I love you guys so much. Bye!